Hey friends, it's your boy. I don't know how much time I have because my phone is absolutely filled with videos and pictures and all kinds of stuff that I probably need to delete if I ever want to film a long form video again. But I had some thoughts about spiritual experiences that I want to talk about a little bit. And that is that I think we are very, very, very quick to dismiss the idea that spiritual experience is something that is incredibly important to the human experience. That doesn't mean every human experience, don't get me wrong. There are some people who go through life who will never have what they would consider to be a spiritual experience, whether that's because of their worldview or just their circumstances. That is completely fine. And even if you consider yourself to be spiritual but never have a spiritual experience, that is also fine. But fundamentally, these kinds of experiences have existed since prehistoric times. We see evidence of shamanic transformation, for example, painted on cave walls. These ideas of taking the qualities of an animal, for example, that you want to aspire to be like, or painting a certain animal in a certain way in order to increase your chances of a successful hunt. This is stuff that we see way, way back, and this was meaningful to people. Now, granted, a lot of times these were in some pretty dark caves, and if you go far back enough in a cave, the oxygen levels dip, and if you light a torch back there, it's going to take more oxygen, you're probably going to get lightheaded, and you might see visions. So that could be part of it. We also know that people liked to trip on psychedelic mushrooms, and that they liked to lick frogs, to go a little nuts. But there are still plenty of examples of people who were incredibly sober, so to speak, who also had these kinds of experiences, which continues to this day. And I think that to completely discount that as a human experience is incredibly limiting. If we are to say, oh, that's just what primitive people do, well, first of all, that tends to fall into some very dangerous categories that anthropologists have fallen into since as long as we've had the field of anthropology, which is to label certain people as primitive or savage, and that just gets into some really, really dangerous territory. At the same time, we need to recognize that people from all different backgrounds, of all stripes, across the world have had experiences like this for a very long time. And the realness factor of what they're experiencing, or the legitimacy of what they're experiencing, does not necessarily discount the fact that this is important to so many people to this day. And I think that if we're going to understand the human experience, then we don't just look at things from a what is literally true perspective. The miasma theory that came before germ theory, for example. We know, to the best of our understanding, that that's not how this works. But to the people of the time, that is what they believed, and it had a fundamental effect on their culture, on how they interacted with the world, on how they tried to prevent disease. And so that explains a lot of their behavior, even if they were doing things based on an incorrect assumption about the world. But fundamentally, it still affects enough of their worldview that it has to be considered when studying these cultures. I would argue the same about spiritual experiences. And I would say that whether or not there are gods, or one god, or no gods, or spirits, or elementals, or an afterlife, regardless of how we conceptualize the world around us in a spiritual form, or not, in the case of many folks, it still affects people in such a way that you can't get a full understanding of what it means to be human without considering it, even if you don't believe in it, which is perfectly fine. And I think a big contributor to that is that spiritual experiences are so incredibly personal that if I were to tell you about my own, I would not try to convince you that the gods that I honor are real based only on my experiences. That's something that people have to find out for themselves. frankly. And I would be incredibly disappointed in someone's critical thinking skills if they listened to my story and immediately started worshiping Freya. You know what I mean? I would find that incredibly upsetting because the reasons that I came to accept that this might be part of reality were long and storied and have been over half a decade of searching and discovery. So someone picking it up immediately and believing wholeheartedly would be a little off-putting to me, in all honesty. And that is how some people believe, and I'm not going to take that from them. But to me, that is a little strange. So I'm not saying that we need to accept everything that we see within the realm of spirituality and spiritual experiences. But I do think that if we immediately shunt this off as being primitive or superstitious or hokey or fake, is incredibly limiting in our worldview. And that we don't have to accept these things as true to understand how they affected people of the time. And that if we're ever going to get a full understanding of what it means to be human and how we are different from other primates, you know, even how we're different from ancient hominins, we're going to have to take that into consideration. And I think it's a damn shame that so often we are encouraged not to. Y'all be good to each other. I love you all. Have a good one.